Welcome, everyone, to Ask the Experts. Today, we're going to be talking about securing AI. I'm Tim Messagy, and I am joined by my security expert, Scott Best, who is the Senior Director of Security Products at Rambus. Welcome, Scott.
Thank you, Tim. Great to be here.
Scott, it's great to have you. To start, can you talk about some of the unique challenges we face when trying to secure AI?
All right. So unique challenges of securing AI. I guess my first initial reaction is to, as I'm known to do, I'm going to take apart your question. I don't think there are unique challenges to protecting AI. I think that some of the challenges of protecting AI are incredibly similar to some other systems, and maybe that's helpful. And because we all have more familiarity with more legacy systems than AI systems, which are relatively new over the last 2 or 3 years. But to start, I guess my most important analogy would be FPGA systems that in that an FPGA system, as you know, field programmable systems, there is a configurable piece of firmware called a bit file. And the bit file is programmed into an FPGA and it causes the programmable logic inside of the FPGA to perform very specific circuit operations that the designers added to the FPGAs. And so the entire value really of all of the engineering, years of testing and evaluation and prototyping, all of that effort has gone into formulating that correct bit file. And then that correct bit file is then loaded into an FPGA. So if you're an adversary or a competitor of the company that did all of the work, it's of great interest to you to see exactly, well, what is in that bit file, right? What are my competitors doing? What are my adversaries doing? Perhaps what are the security weaknesses of that system? And that analogy applies directly to AI. That in AI systems, there's a inference model that is trained by some training system, and that inference model is then loaded into an AI chip, and that AI chip then executes that inference model. The inference models, as it turns out, are pretty well are fairly generic. Generic in the sense that if your adversary actually had your entire inference model, they could learn everything that you learned or everything that the AI model was trained against. I read a report recently, I think NVIDIA published a report saying that the Tesla autopilot model, for example, just the compilation of the learning took 70,000 GPU hours at an expense of 3.5 million just for the compute. So just for the compilation of that AI model is worth $3.5 million to somebody that does not have Tesla's resources. That's an intriguing target to go after. If you're an adversary, if you're a competitor, if you want to see, what is the secret sauce of this particular company, you can go after those AI models. So it is necessary that that model, as it's sitting still in flash memory, or as it's being pulled into the chip and used in compute. So whether it's data at rest or data at use, all of the attack vectors that an adversary would have gone after an FPGA system, right, to recover the IP, to recover the value from that IP, to recover learnings from that IP, all of those attack surfaces that are extant in the FPGA systems are as extant in emerging AI systems.
Scott, given that enormous value that's created by AI, how do we secure it? Is that a software problem? Is that a hardware problem? Is that a system level problem?
Yeah, great question. And the answer is it is a hardware problem, and it is up to the chip manufacturers to implement a secure solution. This is done, as I've described, in the FPGA space. It's been done for 20, 30 years in the FPGA space, and it is a very important requirement for emerging AI silicon. That not only does that silicon have to be able to protect the AI model as it's sitting data at rest, so it has to ensure the privacy of that data. Privacy typically secured by symmetric crypto. So the symmetric crypto engines are required on that chip to be able to operate at any reasonable performance. Those hardware engines have to be tamper resistant hardware engines because your adversary is fairly determined here. And if there's just a very simple power supply leak attack that an adversary can mount on that crypto, then your secrets are pretty much gone as soon as your adversary has the system. So there's data privacy concerns. There's also, of course, data authenticity concerns. You don't want the adversary being able to modify what the FPGAs would call a bit file. You want to protect against adversarial modification that can cause, malfunctions to the chip. It might allow malware to be inserted in the chip that allows, subsequent access to an authentic model. So it's really important that the bit file and the firmware is protected with strong authenticity requirements. So both privacy and authenticity needs to be assured. And finally, once you're securing against privacy and authenticity, there's a performance question of doing that you can't spend, especially for some of these edge AI systems that are going into sensor fusion, perhaps for some sort of safety systems. These systems have to come up very quickly. If you had a nav system on a car, for example, and that nav system was somehow doing a sensor fusion of safety systems, you can't wait 10 seconds for that firmware to be securely decrypted, authenticated, and then loaded into the inference model. That has to come up very quickly so that the user experience is, the security is transparent to the user experience. So those three things, that the performance of the security, the data privacy, and the data authenticity, all hardware level problems that are up to the chip vendor themselves to implement, just like has been done in the FPGA systems.
Thank you, Scott. Hey, so all of this development in AI is happening at a time where in the parallel space, we've got the evolution towards quantum computing. So how does the hardware level security for chips in general, but AI specifically, how is that impacted by the advent of quantum capable computers?
Yeah. All right. Great question. Another great question. Let me think. Um, Quantum computers are an emerging threat, as you know, to what we understand today as the standard cryptography. So all of the cryptography that is based, all public key cryptography that is used to secure the authenticity of your firmware images, all of the public key cryptography that's used for secure key exchange over web browsers, all of that is under threat by this emergence of what the community refers to as what cryptographically relevant quantum computers. And the estimate is that where we are today in quantum computer development is it needs about another 5 to 10 years before cryptographically relevant quantum computers are going to exist. There's a lot of emergent threats associated with that. That's going to have to stay for an entire other Ask the Experts. But specifically to your questions about AI, as I was describing, when your AI model is data at rest, the privacy that needs to be able to secure that data privacy must be enforced with 256-bit key strength on the symmetric encryption, because 128-bit key strength is no longer going to be considered secure once cryptographically relevant quantum computers exist in the world. Similarly, the actual authentication mechanisms are going to have to rely on emerging stateful, stateless hash technology. It's going to have to rely on dilithium for a key signing protocol, again, for the same reason that adversaries will be able to factor keys if they're used, the more traditional RSA and elliptic curve technologies are expected to fall over in the presence of those computers. So it is something to factor when systems that are being built today are expected to be in the field for, on the order of 5 to 10 years. There's some smaller, there are some types of commercial systems, they don't look like automobiles, but they're smaller, like IoT systems that are supposed to be in the market for 2 or 3 years before they're cycled. They're probably fine. But if you're putting a system in place and saying, yeah, this needs to remain secure in the field for 10, 15 years, then those systems absolutely need to be considering right now that the protocols that go into securing the privacy and the authenticity as described, those protocols need to be implemented in quantum secure mechanisms.
Scott, given the rich, current threat environment and the prospect of the quantum threat environment. What does Rambus offer that will help secure AI hardware?
Yeah, good question. Rambus, of course, has a suite of hardware accelerators. And the important part about doing this performance, it, doing this well at high performance is to have hardware acceleration. As I described, you can't wait 10 seconds to bring up these AI model systems. So that requires hardware. The hardware itself requires tamper-resistant hardware because you have very determined and skillful adversaries. So if you did not have, for example, hardware that was secured against, power analysis, if it wasn't secured against fault injection attacks, then you are leaving yourself open to the fact that, yeah, my data is private right now and my data is authentic, but it's only private for, somebody that's not actually trying to break into the system. And you always have to imagine that what your adversary is bringing to bear to attack a system is, commensurate with the value of what they extract. So as we described, if you have, $3.5 million of value inside of a system, your adversary is going to be pretty comfortable, investing six figures to go after your system. And these are not very complicated attacks. And what is required to prevent those not complicated attacks from working is tamper-resistant hardware. So we have tamper-resistant hardware for, as described, the data privacy, the AES 256-bit, the authenticated encryption there. We have tamper-resistant hardware but for the firmware checks, for the stateful hashing checks. And yeah, so those are the products that Rambus has been offering into the space. And we, of course, already have several customers in the development phase using those hardware blocks to secure their AI silicon.
So, Scott, thank you. I mean, it looks adversaries already have this rich toolbox of kind of the traditional tools, reverse engineering, and FIA and power analysis. They potentially have quantum computing coming in the 5 to 10 year horizon. What about AI? Can adversaries actually use AI to attack AI?
Oh, wow. That is pretty meta. Um, can AI use AI to attack AI? That's yeah, consider the irony there. Um, Sure. Yeah. I mean, one of the things, I mean, AI is not great at a lot of things right now, but one thing it's actually pretty effective at is, finding the signal in the noise, and
Yes.
some very high systems where AI can be very well trained at finding a very small signal within a very large amount of noise. And it turns out that power analysis side channel is very similar to that. I mean, you're trying to find a very small signal within a lot of noise. And because, of course, with power analysis, that means that the power consumption of a chip is correlated to secret key material. And if you can listen carefully enough to the power supply, then you can discern some of the secret information. We call that piece an information leakage. I mean, right now, there's very traditional statistic models to extract that information. And I
Right.
am, okay, yeah, I'm a little worried about what a very well-trained AI system might be able to do and its degree of performance inside of, if it is trained against power analysis sidechain. So thank you for making me really scared about that.
It's my pleasure. You've already done the same for me. So, Scott, thank you for your time.
Of
And
course.
for everybody who joined us here today, thank you for joining us on Ask the Experts. And we will see you again here real soon.
Thanks, Tim.